hundreds of thousands of people come through Panama from Colombia, walk through the Darien Gap every year, and then make their way up to the United States. That poses a large burden on Panama and on the United States, of course. And it's been a real problem here. It was actually the reason that the current president was elected. President Molino actually got himself elected by making immigration the big issue. And that's interesting because it wasn't an issue until myself and some other journalists like Michael Yon, Oscar Blue Ramirez, and Ben Berkwam started making it an issue, and people here in Panama started getting wind of the fact that it was costing their country a lot of money to house and feed all these migrants that were coming through. Before that, the former president had done a pretty good job of hiding the migration issue from the people and busing the migrants directly from the Darien Gap all the way up to Costa Rica, dropping them off. Nobody in Panama was any the wiser. But when we started reporting on the incredible amount of money it was costing, reporting on the environmental damage in the Darien Gap, and how it was affecting the Indian populations out there, about all of the United Nations and other NGOs that were here in Panama taking advantage of the situation to make themselves a lot of money, all of a sudden it became an issue and ended up getting the president elected. He got elected on a platform of, I'm going to close the Darien Gap and I'm going to stop the migrant flow through Panama, which would reduce the number of people coming into the United States by about 500,000 people. Doesn't sound like much when there's 5 million a year coming into the US during the Biden administration, but it is significant because the people coming through the Darien Gap are specifically the kind of people that you would least want in the United States in many cases. I'm talking about people from very backward, failed state, third world countries, very violent countries around the world, and countries that are known to harbor terrorists like Syria and Afghanistan and Somalia and places like that. And why are they going to the United States? They're going because they can. And they can make a lot more money in the United States than they could make if they were going to live in any of those other countries. During the Trump administration, it was much harder to get into the United States because of the Remain in Mexico policy. Because of the Remain in Mexico policy, many people didn't even bother to come to the United States. They would go south instead of north, so Venezuelans would go to Ecuador, or they would go to Peru, they'd go to Bolivia, and stay there. There's ample evidence that the Trump administration was far more effective at stopping the illegal flow of migrants into the United States than the Biden administration has been, or the Obama administration before him. During the Biden-Harris administration, we have seen about 5 million people a year coming illegally into the United States. The total number of non-citizens living in the US are somewhere around 10% of the total number of people in the United States. It's never been that high before. And I have to explain non-citizens. When I say non-citizens, I don't just mean illegals, people who are here as naturalized citizens, legal residents, people with a green card, or people who are just completely illegal and undocumented. As of the 2020 census, there were 23.2 million voting age non-citizens, and about half of those were illegal. That was as of 2020. We're 4 years later than that now, so now it's closer to 30 million. 30 million people who are of voting age but cannot legally vote in the United States. These people present a concern to people in the United States who can vote, because we don't want them voting illegally and skewing our elections. People who are non-citizens, whether they're here legally or not, are barred from voting in federal elections. There's no scenario where those people can legally vote. And so there have been a lot of people concerned about the inadequate enforcement of that rule, especially in states that have very lax ID requirements. This is why we're having this big fight with the Democrats over voter ID requirements. This is a serious issue that has been playing out in the courts for the last 4 years. This current election, it will be less likely that people will be able to vote illegally than in the last election for two reasons: because of the legal challenges brought in the last 4 years to try to close some of those loopholes, and because we're not in the middle of COVID, so there are a lot fewer places where you can do mail-in voting. It's much more difficult to do mail-in voting, and that is going to make it less likely that people will steal the election, or whether it's accidental or intentional. Now, there have been studies on the electoral impact of non-citizens. Mathematically, it's not really something we need to worry about a whole lot. I want to explain to you why. This comes from the Center for Immigration Studies, so it's very trustworthy data. They figure that there are 12 states and one district in Nebraska where voting age non-citizen populations theoretically exceed the margin of victory from the last presidential election in 2020. Meaning, if all of those non-citizens in those 12 states went to vote, they would sway the outcome of the election. In Georgia, for example, only 1.5% of non-citizens of voting age would need to vote to match the 2020 margin of victory. In Arizona, only 1.7% would change the outcome. Now, it gets worse from there. You go places like Michigan and New Jersey, and it'd be like 60 or 70% of the total number of non-citizens would have to vote illegally to make a difference in the outcome. And that's highly unlikely. But since those polls have shown that those non-citizens, if they were allowed to vote, would vote at least 60 or 70% for Democrats, shows us that even a small percentage of illegal people casting a vote illegally would make a big difference. And it would be a cause for major concern in the upcoming election. And this is something that we definitely want to be leaning on our Congress critters about. We definitely want to keep in mind and have our eyes and ears open about. Now, let me explain to you one of the reasons why I moved to Panama. It's not because I wanted to abandon my country. Don't you dare make that claim, because I fought and bled for this country. I love America. And one of the reasons that I moved to Panama is because I watched massive voter fraud taking place in Detroit during the election cycle 2012, the second Obama election. It's illegal to do any electioneering within 1,000 feet of a polling place. They don't want people being guilted or threatened into voting a certain way. All electioneering should stop before you get to the door of the polls. But in 2012, in Detroit, there were people with Obama t-shirts on standing in the door of the election place, stopping people on the way in and saying, "Now, you're gonna vote for Obama, right?" And if you had said, "No, I'm gonna vote for Romney," they wouldn't let you in. They would have ripped your arms off. And that's why I want to point out something that I have seen twice now in this election cycle on the right. This is concerning to me. I have seen or heard viewers who have said, I went to vote today wearing my MAGA hat, and they told me I couldn't come in and cast my vote. And I said, there ain't no way I'm taking my hat off to come in and vote. I'm an American citizen. And I'm like, oh, come on, people. We have this rule for a reason. Do you want somebody standing in the door with a Kamala Harris t-shirt on, telling everybody that comes in they better make sure they vote for Kamala Harris? If you don't, then take your stupid MAGA hat off and leave it in your truck when you go to vote. It works both ways. I know you're proud. I want to make America great too. But don't be stupid like the people on the other side. Let's talk about apportionment. This is one way where illegals actually do get to vote just by being in the United States that a lot of people don't understand. Every 10 years, we have a census in the United States, and the census just counts bodies. It just counts living people. Trump tried to get them to add a citizenship question on the census, and the left lost its ever-loving mind. Why? Because if you know whether or not somebody that you're counting in the census is here illegally, then you could disqualify that number of people from counting in the apportionment statistics. Large non-citizen populations in states that are traditionally red states, like Texas, could eventually shift political power toward the blue side through apportionment. And the people wouldn't have to actually be able to vote. All they have to do is just be there. Here's the balance that we need to talk about. A lot of people are worried about illegal immigrants trying to vote or being able to vote and swaying the elections that way. But I would submit to you that's not that much of a concern, because the fact that they are here in the United States and the fact that they could possibly find a way to vote illegally is going to make enough legal American voters vote for Donald Trump so that he will address this problem, that it will cancel out any illegal votes that actually do get cast. It's still a bad thing if they vote illegally, but I don't think it's that much of a concern. I want to ease your mind a little bit on that, because there are a lot of people. This is a huge issue in this particular election, and it may very well change the outcome of this election, because Kamala Harris is wearing this like a noose around her neck. We've been saying all along, the Biden-Harris administration is going to do this with the CBP1 app specifically to make the numbers look better than they actually are ahead of the election. So they paid Mexico to apprehend more people for the time being, just holding those people on the Mexican side, building up illegal immigrants waiting in Mexico right now to cross the border as soon as the election is over. If Donald Trump gets elected on November 5th, there will be, mark my words, a tsunami of astronomical proportions coming across the U.S. southern border between November and January when he's inaugurated. But even if he's not elected, if Kamala Harris gets in, then there won't be any reason for them to keep holding them in Mexico anymore. And that's costing Mexico money. So Mexico will let them go and they will come into the United States. So if Kamala Harris gets elected, you can expect not another 10 million in the next 4 years, but probably 15 to 20 million in the next 4 years coming in across the border. Now, could Donald Trump stop the flow of illegal migrants into America? Sure, he could, absolutely. One of the best ways he could do it is one that he didn't try last time, and that would be putting a tax on the migrants. So if we put a tax or a fine on every person that gets picked up by the U.S. Border Patrol, your $300 fine to make an asylum claim, or we immediately deport you somewhere. I'm not sure how well that would work, but it's worth a try. Something that would work much better would be taxing remittances. Putting a large tax of maybe 50% on remittances is going to reduce the incentive for people to come to the United States. We could also make any illegal migrant ineligible for any federal, state, or local welfare program. That would do the job right there. People would just stop coming. All of this is driven by you guys, not by us. So again, go to chuckholton.com, become a supporter, download the book. You can get the book with all the checklists and everything as a downloadable PDF. And you can also get the Grace Project about the crisis intervention team at your church just by being a supporter on chuckholton.com. We appreciate all of you. We're going to be coming out with more. We're working right now on a very exciting coffee table book for the end of the year that will have some amazing photographs that I've taken just this year. I've got 90 million photos that I've taken over my career, but we're going to do a coffee table book for 2024 and maybe make it a tradition. At the end of the year, we'll put out a coffee table book, and all the proceeds of that coffee table book will go to supporting some of the people that we take care of around the world. More than 40 people now that we're supporting thanks to your generosity. Okay, God bless you guys. Thank you for watching.